Hi guys, and welcome to this new episode of The Inexplicable. Given the great success of the first episode, dedicated to 5 terrifying Italian legends, today I want to bring you a second part where the main characters will be 5 more chilling stories woven into the dark fabric of our country. Popular trends that in some areas are very well known and in some ways still maintained, but that in general are unknown to the wider public throughout Italy. And some of these are so fascinating and at the same time terrifying that they deserve to be brought back to light. So make yourselves comfortable, put on some headphones if you can, and get ready to discover a part of our local folklore that can really give you goosebumps. So here are the 5 most terrifying Italian legends you've never been told, Volume 2. Colobraro, the cursed village. If there's a place in Italy where the line between legend and reality becomes so thin it's almost imperceptible, that place is undoubtedly Colobraro. A small village perched on Basilicata's lonely slopes, suspended between earth and something darker. It's not just a village, but also a name that's spoken with caution, often replaced with vague expressions like that place or the village. Unnameable because many even today believe that just mentioning it can lead to tragic consequences. Nicknamed the village where nothing ever happens, it's actually a stage for unease, continuous, subtle, and underground. A place where, as rumored for decades or centuries, every action may have unexpected consequences. Every word can unleash invisible forces. Every visitor risks taking home a part of that dark energy that seems trapped among its ancient stones. But where does this sinister reputation come from? The origins are lost in the mists of time. Some say there were ancient witches who lived in the woods around the village, women capable of summoning spirits and casting curses with just a glance. In the Middle Ages, the village was reportedly a center for occult practices, with magical arts passed down as a dangerous legacy. And in fact, even today, some of the local elders speak fearfully of certain masher, figures similar to witches, capable of reading fate, breaking bonds, or causing illnesses just by using prayers and forgotten formulas. Others, though, link Colobraro's bad reputation to a particular event. It is said that during a city council session in the 1940s, a lawyer, to prove that the town's misfortune was just a result of superstition, uttered the phrase, "If what I'm saying isn't true, may the chandelier fall on my head." A few seconds later, the heavy chandelier in the room actually crashed to the ground, just a few inches from the lawyer. There was no rational reason that could explain what happened. From then on, Colobraro became synonymous with a curse, and many began to have a blind faith in its dark influence. But the lesson is much broader than that story. Residents discuss objects vanishing and reappearing in strange places, children suddenly becoming mute, and animals acting irrationally, and about shadows that move where they shouldn't be. Some swear they've heard wailing at night coming from the deserted alleys of the village. Others talk about sudden chills and the feeling of being watched even when they're completely alone. Colobraro is even more unsettling because the curse appears to extend beyond the village's borders. In the neighboring towns, just saying its name is enough to spark superstition and distrust. There are stories of canceled weddings, failed business deals, and even unexplained illnesses. They're all blamed simply on having dealt with someone from Colobraro. And yet, paradoxically, It's exactly this dark reputation that has attracted the attention of the curious, paranormal enthusiasts, and daring travelers. Some offer rational explanations, citing collective autosuggestion or coincidence. But every time someone tries to debunk the myth, something happens that makes them change their mind. A mishap, a minor accident, a sudden illness. Coincidences? Maybe, but you can't deny there are a lot, maybe too many. Colobraro isn't just a village abandoned by time. It's an enigma, a living symbol of the power that stories, beliefs, and fears can have over reality. So if you ever find yourself in Basilicata, among the Lucanian mountains, and someone points out a road to you saying it's better not to go that way, listen to them. Because whoever messes with Colobraro ends up in serious trouble. The Werewolf of Villa Borghese. Let's now explore the heart of Rome at Villa Borghese, one of the city's most beloved and evocative sites. A sprawling park serves as a green oasis amid ancient Roman streets, a refuge of peace and beauty where shady avenues intertwine with artistic fountains, museums full of masterpieces, and hidden corners that seem suspended in time. However, behind this idyllic facade, under the silvery light of the moon, a dark secret is hidden, a legend that has rooted itself in Roman folklore and ancestral fear. The legend of the werewolf of Villa Borghese began in Italy, wounded and divided after World War II. A country trying to rebuild amid post-war ruins and uncertainty. It was the late 1940s and early 1950s, an era marked by social tensions and an atmosphere filled with unease, in which old superstitions seemed to resurface among ordinary people. It was precisely in that context that stories began to circulate, almost like fearful whispers, about a mysterious creature that was said to roam in the shadows of the Roman park. They described a terrifying half-man, half-wolf figure. On full moon nights, it would stealthily walk the paths and groves of Villa Borghese. A huge and menacing shadow with claws as sharp as razors and a body covered in dark fur, capable of letting out a chilling howl, a cold sound that seemed to tear through the silence of the Roman night. There were numerous accounts from passers-by who claimed to have felt watched, followed, even attacked, while walking alone among the trees and ancient statues of the park. Many claimed to see the beast's eyes shining in the dark, a sinister glow that suggested the presence of something supernatural, a nightmare that had nothing human about it. The newspapers of the time, drawn to sensationalism and fear, reported these stories with great fanfare, fueling panic among the citizens. The authorities, initially skeptical, could no longer ignore the situation when, in 1949, a series of mysterious attacks disrupted the tranquility of Villa Borghese. People were injured, without any apparent reason, by mysterious figures, with deep scratches and reports of heart-rending screams coming from the park during the darkest hours. The police launched an investigation, and testimonies quickly surfaced. That's how a young man ended up becoming the scapegoat. On the surface, everything seemed normal, but once arrested, in front of the investigators, with a feverish look and a voice broken by anguish, he confessed something incredible. On full moon nights, he felt a primordial and wild force inside himself, an animalistic power that radically transformed him, giving him superhuman strength and ferocious instincts. Was he truly the victim of an ancient curse, or rather, prey to psychological disorders and hallucinations? The science of that time tried to explain those phenomena with clinical theories, speaking of mental lycanthropy or personality dissociation. But the Roman people preferred to embrace the darker and more fascinating version, that of the real werewolf who roams the silent nights of Villa Borghese. That young man ended up in prison, but the legend did not fade away. On the contrary, it became even more deeply rooted in the collective imagination of the city, becoming a story that is still whispered today. when the full moon rises and the park empties. Many Romans even today avoid walking alone at night on those paths, fearful, afraid to face that fierce shadow, that wild whisper from the ancient trees. And so, if you find yourself in Rome and the night invites you for a solitary walk, remember this story. Observe the moon and listen to the night. It won't just be leaves rustling or wind slipping through branches. They might be an ancient creature's footsteps hiding in Villa Borghese's shadows, a remnant from a time when darkness hid terrible secrets, ready to resurface every time the full moon lit up Rome. Because certain legends, rather than being challenged, should be respected and sometimes only feared. The Screaming Mummy of Ferentillo. In the green heart of Umbria, there's a place that combines the beauty of a postcard landscape with the dark allure of a timeless mystery. Its name is Ferentillo, a small medieval village nestled among the rocks and immersed in silence, protected by ancient walls and built on legends that have withstood the centuries. Here, the narrow and winding streets twist like sails on the body of a sleeping giant. The stone houses seem to whisper the secrets of those who lived here centuries ago. And yet beneath this quiet appearance, there is something unsettling. At the foot of the Church of San Stefano, a former funerary crypt now conceals one of Italy's most unsettling places. The Museum of the Mummies of Ferentillo, a small underground space where dozens of naturally mummified bodies have lain for more than 4 centuries, preserved in an impressive way. Their half-open mouths, teeth still visible, hands contracted in poses that evoke tension and pain are truly incredible. But the most unsettling detail is that these mummies seem to be watching us. Visitors to the museum often say they feel watched, as if those now empty eyes still have something to say. Some seem serene, but others appear to be caught in the middle of a scream or a plea. And among all those mummified bodies, there's one that immediately catches your attention. He's known as the Screaming Mummy, and the reason he was given that name is immediately obvious. His mouth is open in a harrowing scream. The deep eye sockets appear to stare at anyone nearby. His hands face his chest as if pushing something or someone away. No one knows his identity. There are no records or inscriptions that would allow him to be identified. But his face, or what's left of it, shows such anguish that it suggests his final moments were chilling. Scholars hypothesize that he might have been buried alive, either as a victim of a mistake or perhaps as a cruel punishment. Confronted with this great mystery, legends quickly emerged here. According to one of the oldest legends, the Screaming Mummy was a witch, condemned to be locked within the sacred walls of the church to purify her corrupted soul. Others say she was a young woman accused of adultery, punished with a slow death, left to die of hunger and fear in complete darkness. Some of the local elders tell a different story, that of a curse. They say anyone who meets the mummy's gaze may carry its torment, and this wouldn't just be a simple folk belief. Over the years, many witnesses, tourists, historians, and religious people have reported unexplained phenomena. Faint voices emerging from the silence of the night, footsteps of unknown origin, heard when the museum is empty and closed to the public, self-moving objects and fleeting shadows seen in the display case reflections. A well-known story tells of a photographer who, after photographing the Screaming Mummy for the museum, began having terrible recurring nightmares. In it, he was chased by a woman with a gray face, long black hair, and her mouth wide open in a distorted scream. The dreams always ended the same, with the woman catching up to him and staring straight into his eyes, upset and accusatory. She didn't say a word, but that look said it all. Something deeply disturbed her and kept her from resting in peace. After months of torment, the man contacted the museum asking for the photo to be destroyed. He was convinced that the shot had awakened something that should not have been disturbed. and it seems that once the photograph was made to disappear, the nightmares finally ceased. But there is a question that continues to fascinate scientists and occultists in exactly the same way. How and why did this strange phenomenon occur? Scholars have hypothesized that the mummification of the bodies happened thanks to the presence in this area of a very rare underground microclimate, combined with particular microorganisms in the soil capable of preventing the decomposition of the corpses. A rational explanation, yes. But then, why only in this crypt and not in others in the region? Why do some mummies have serene expressions, while others, like the screaming one, seem crystallized in endless despair? Some believe that the place itself is charged with energy, a dark and mysterious knot that binds spirituality, death, and memory. Others suspect that ancient rituals, never completely vanished, have left an imprint still active beneath the stones of the church. Perhaps the answer remains in the crypt's darkness, where bodies rest forever. And the mystery remains, a puzzle that no one will ever be able to solve. What do the mummies of Ferentillo really hide? What story are they trying to tell? The Hyena of San Giorgio? Imagine walking in a small Piedmontese village where the cobblestone streets seem to take us back in time. The air is damp, the mists slowly rise from the surrounding fields, wrapping everything in a muffled silence. The old houses seem to watch you with their half-closed windows like tired eyes, and the wind whispers through the alleys, as if it were guarding secrets too dark to be spoken aloud. We are in San Giorgio Canavese, an apparently quiet corner of Piedmont, nestled in the countryside near Turin. But as often happens in the most peaceful places, even here a terrible legend is hidden. A story that speaks of blood, madness, and silence, of a man who became a symbol of horror remembered in history by a name that still sends shivers today, the Hyena of San Giorgio. We are at the end of the 19th century, perhaps at the dawn of the 20th. No one knows the exact date for sure. Stories are passed down orally, with each generation adding a detail, whisper, or image more frightening than before. In those years, there lived in the village a butcher, a solitary, reserved man who rarely spoke to customers, and whom no one could remember ever seeing, surrounded by friends or family. No wife, no family, just him, his shop, and his knives. He was very famous for his delicious cured meats. It was said they had a unique, unmistakable flavor that attracted buyers even from outside the province. People would arrive on horseback, in carriages, to taste his smoked meat, his sausages, his house specialty. But over time, some oddities began to make the townspeople suspicious. No one ever saw livestock arrive, suppliers, or herd animals at night for slaughter. Yet every morning the butcher's display was full, too full. Some whispered that he had a private farm. Others, the older ones, began to look at him with fear. They said lights would turn on and off at night in his shop, and sometimes noises like screams or heavy thuds could be heard. But no one dared to investigate further. Then the disappearances began. Passing men, street vendors, laborers without families, never anyone local. But certainly after setting foot in San Giorgio, some never left again. In the village, someone began connecting the pieces. Strange absences, meat always plentiful, and the acrid smell sometimes coming from the shop even late at night. Legend has it that the disappearance of a young stranger marked a turning point in the story. He had been seen entering the butcher shop, but never coming out. The worried family members alerted the authorities, and for the first time, the back door of the shop was forced open. What's shared today is truly mind-blowing. In the back room, shrouded in a sticky gloom, a nauseating smell hit them like a wave. It wasn't just animal blood, it was something sweeter, thicker, more human. Inside, officers discovered the unimaginable: human remains, bones among slaughterhouse waste, a head in bubbling cauldrons, and meat hanging from hooks that didn't seem to belong to any known creature. It was a slaughterhouse of horror, a theater of madness. The country was shaken by a wave of terror. The news spread like wildfire, but the authorities, according to reports, did everything they could to cover up the case. Too shocking, too dangerous for public opinion. No official report, no trial, no names, just rumors, and fear. There are several versions about what happens to the butcher. Some swear that he was lynched by an enraged mob and burned alive within the walls of his own shop, while others claim that he was declared insane and locked up in the asylum, where he died in silence, never confessing anything. But the nickname, that one remained, the hyena. And can you imagine why he was given that name? He was said to feed on his victims' remains like hyenas, beasts, and scavengers, besides serving them to the unfortunate customers who decided to stop by his shop. Today, only ruins, blackened stones, and a few untouched dirty bricks remain of the butcher shop. Yet those who live nearby tell of strange things, a stench that rises into the air during the autumn months, figures in the shadows silently watching from the bricked-up windows of the ruins. And on certain nights, it is said that you can hear the metallic sound of knives being sharpened. A legend? Well, very likely. A story created to scare people or to keep the curious away from dangerous places. But those who live in San Giorgio, who grew up there, who know every corner of the town, don't even think about laughing. When the butcher is mentioned, Anzi's expression changes and he lowers his gaze. Because deep down, everyone knows there's always a grain of truth in the most terrible stories, even the ones nobody wants to remember. If you ever pass through San Giorgio Canavese and have doubts, it's best not to ask where the meat comes from. The House of Souls. Now we're moving to Genoa. But it's not its most well-known part, the one with ships, narrow alleys, and markets smelling of the sea. No, we're heading into the hills where time seems to have gotten stuck among the branches and stones, and where the souls, they say, have never stopped wandering. We are in the hilly district of Voltri, once an independent village, now an integral part of the city. Along Via dei Giovi, an ancient and winding road, which once was one of the main routes of communication between Liguria and Piedmont. An artery used for centuries by travelers, pilgrims, and merchants, solitary dreamers or secret keepers, often unaware of their fate in the forest shadow. And it is right here where today the vegetation grows wild and the brambles intertwine like skeletal hands that it hides. One of Liguria's darkest and most unsettling places, the infamous House of Souls. Today it's little more than a ruin, but in the past it was a well-known inn. A simple stone building with a sloping roof and a stable for the horses. At first glance, nothing suspicious. A rest stop for those who traveled for days under the sun or rain, looking for a dry bed and a hot meal. But behind that welcoming facade, something terrible was hidden, something monstrous. According to rumors passed down for generations by the locals, the innkeepers were actually murderers. They struck right during the night. The most naive or isolated travelers were welcomed kindly, seated, fed, and then killed in their sleep and robbed. Their bodies, they say, were buried in the fields behind the inn or dragged into the thick of the woods where no one would ever find them. Some chronicles from that time mention unsettling discoveries, bones unearthed after heavy rains, human remains found while plowing fields, and personal items linked to people who vanished and never returned. But no one was ever arrested, no trial, no conviction. One day, the inn closed without warning or explanation, just as it had opened, quietly becoming shrouded in mystery. The neighbors say that no one ever bought it, that the doors were nailed shut, the windows barred, and that night after night something kept moving inside. Flickering lights, shadows behind broken glass, and eerie wails carried by the wind to the village houses. Years went by, and with the war, the memory of the House of Souls seemed to fade away, as if covered by dust. But after World War II, when families were looking for affordable shelters to start over from scratch, someone dared to tempt fate. A young family, attracted by the low price of the property and skeptical about the legends, decided to move into the cursed house. They thought that what was said about it was just stories, unfounded superstitions. But soon the house began to show its true face. According to the statements given by the family, the rooms were freezing even in the middle of summer. The windows would fog up for no reason, and at night they heard whispers, as if someone was speaking from behind the closed doors. They heard light footsteps, tapping on the stairs. Objects disappeared without any logical explanation, and the feeling of unease was constant. Then the couple's youngest daughter began to behave strangely. She woke up crying every night at the same time. She said she saw a woman, a motionless figure at the end of the hallway, dressed in black with a veil covering her face, or what was left of it. A woman who didn't speak, but who seemed to cry desperately, constantly. After a few weeks, the family fled. They left everything, furniture, clothes, photos, and never returned to claim a single spoon. And they left behind a promise. We will never return to that house, not even for all the gold in the world. And from that moment on, the House of Souls remained suspended in eternal silence. Nature began to reclaim it. Ivy on the walls, branches coming in through the windows, moss on the walls. But no one dared to come near, and none of the residents were able to forget what had happened. In the 1980s, the mystery resurfaced when Radio Televisione Italiana made a report for Strange Facts of Ordinary People. The journalists entered the abandoned house with cameras, filming the ruined rooms, the corridors overrun with leaves, and the cracked walls. But it was during the final editing, while editing the report, that something inexplicable happened. As the reporter walked through the rooms, for just an instant, a single frame, something appeared, a shadow, a figure. At the end of a dark hallway, you could clearly make out the outline of a woman in period clothing, motionless, her arms at her sides, her face blurred. No one present saw anything during filming or noticed it then, but viewers at home did. Phone calls to the editorial office multiplied. Someone recorded the segment on video home system and analyzed it frame by frame, and that figure was there. Real. A defect in the tape, a television trick. No one ever found out. Since then, the House of Souls has no longer been just a legend. It became documented evidence, a true mystery. It became known as one of Italy's most haunted places. A place where the boundary between the living and the dead is almost non-existent. Imperceptible. And maybe even today, among those walls devoured by humidity and roots, there is someone who waits. A restless soul condemned to relive the last moment of its existence every night, waiting for someone, brave enough or foolish enough, to come back and listen to it. And that's how we end this new roundup of terrifying Italian legends. At this point, all that's left for me to do is hand it over to you. Which story made you most uncomfortable? Did you know any of them? Would you like to add details to what I said? Do it in a comment. Before we finish, I have a request. The best legends are the ones told or suggested by you. So, if you know one that deserves to be included in another episode of the podcast, I invite you to let me know about it. Write me an email at the address L'Inspiegabile, and I'll be happy to consider it. Greetings, and see you next time with L'Inspiegabile. Inspiegable Podcast has an original format written and directed by Luca Perella, sound design by Matteo D'Alessandro. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, or share it with your friends. See you at the next episode of L'Inspiegabile.